That irritates a whole lot of people.
He moved from the sports pages to the front pages.
Within days, Ali is stripped of his license to box in all 50 states.
9 top Negro athletes meet with Cassius Clay to discuss his anti-draft stand.
Jim Brown and Bill Russell organized a summit meeting in Cleveland.
Clay's induction refusal cost him his title, and he faces a possible 5-year prison sentence.
The Army was willing to make a deal. They were willing to guarantee that he would go in special services and he would be able to box. Behind the scenes, Herbert Muhammad, as a businessman, looked upon that as a possible option.
The meeting started with them talking to Ali about accepting the deal.
You wouldn't have to worry about being a soldier as such. You can do public relations. But Ali's attitude was, nope, don't want a deal.
2 weeks later, Ali is convicted of draft evasion in federal court. Sentenced to 5 years in prison and banned from boxing for 3 years, he remains free while his case is appealed.
Whatever suffering or punishment I may have to take, it'll all be because of my religion.
He was unafraid of the political repercussions, unafraid of any cultural repercussions, unafraid of losing money.
He said he would probably fight again, but it was okay if he didn't. Long as he believed that he was the people's champ, that was good enough for him.
A month after his conviction, Ali marries 17-year-old Belinda Boyd with the approval of Nation of Islam leaders. She fully supports her husband's refusal to be drafted.
He said, I can't kill anybody. I just said, trust me, you'll be the greatest man ever lived if you don't go.
Facing 5 years in prison and unable to fight while appealing his case, newlywed Ali needs to earn money, so he embarks on a college lecture tour.
I would like to hear this from you, and I want the world and the cameras to hear it. Who's the heavyweight champion of the world?
The student audiences loved his opposition to the war in Vietnam, but they were very much opposed when he spoke to them against the idea of interracial dating, against the idea of living in the same community.
During those 3.5 years that he wasn't fighting, basically the only 2 things that he was doing was going on college campuses, and the other was being on television with Howard Cosell.
What do you say to that? I predict that the fans will be angry at the experts for misleading them so much.
I think that his relationship with Howard Cosell was critical to his acceptance by America.
Howard had the deepest respect for the champ. Howard many times privately defended Ali and Ali's right to express himself and the right to feel the way he felt about where we were with civil rights at those times. But Howard also didn't take any punches. If he felt like Ali had overstepped his bounds, he would confront him. It was part of the chemistry of these guys. You had 2 gigantic egos.
After 3.5 years in exile, Ali remains free as his appeals proceed in federal court. And while politics cost Ali his boxing license, politics provides a chance to fight again. Georgia has no state boxing commission. Individual municipalities can sanction a fight. So Black State Senator Leroy Johnson strikes a deal with Atlanta's white mayor, Sam Massell.
Leroy Johnson said, I want this fight to happen. I carry a lot of votes with me.
Thus, Ali's comeback begins, surprisingly in the Deep South.
Here's an African-American reviled around America. Suddenly Atlanta is embracing him.
He said, I got my license. I'm going to fight in Georgia. I'm going to fight in Georgia. I said, in Georgia? I said, down south? He said, yeah. I said, oh, Lord, we in trouble now.
Ali returns to the ring on October 26, 1970.
I don't believe that anybody is happier than this young man to once again step into the ring.
28-year-old Ali was stripped of his title, but he's never lost a fight. and Jerry Quarry is not considered competitive. Ali opens a cut over Quarry's eye in round 3, and the fight is stopped.
Inactivity is deadly for any fighter, and for Muhammad Ali to have come back and still display the incredible hand speed and fluidity that he showed was amazing.
While Ali's draft evasion appeal works its way up to the Supreme Court, the NAACP sues the New York State Athletic Commission in federal court, arguing that their ban on Ali is discriminatory. Their ban is lifted. Free to fight in New York again, Ali stops Oscar Bonavena at Madison Square Garden in December 1970.
It's over! Ali is the knockout winner!
Setting up a title shot against Joe Frazier for an unprecedented $5 million purse.
Now we have a chance to see who the real champion of the world is.
That was revolutionary. You know, $2.5 million apiece. Wow.
Back then, that was a vast sum of money.
Even Mickey Mantle was not making that much money.
Well, let Joe Frazier talk all he wants. We got a few miles to straighten all this mess out.
He brought people to the sport that didn't even necessarily follow boxing. They just liked Muhammad Ali.
I have fixed up the round that Joe Frazier will go down.
You got this person who's standing up and he's been stripped of his title. People wanted to see, who is this guy?
His fights meant more than just the sport of boxing. His fights were like a fight for justice.
Ali was carrying the weight of everything. I don't think it's possible to overstate how much Ali embodied the hopes, aspirations, beliefs of young people in general and young African Americans in particular.
Joe's gonna come out smoking, and I ain't gonna be joking.
The bout is set for March 8th, 1971. As the fight approaches, the battle between two unbeaten heavyweights becomes far more than a boxing match.
Get your hands off me!
If you were a liberal, you were rooting for Ali. If you were conservative, you were rooting for Joe.
It was a clash of cultures. There were the people who were demanding civil rights, who were against Vietnam, and the people who thought Vietnam was right. Then, damn it, we're going to put our views in the ring and settle it once and for all. March 8, 71. The world flat out stopped.
The apartment that we lived in was going crazy for that fight.
We were glued to the radio.
I can still see Ali leaning back over the ropes, saying, "No contest." Meanwhile, Frazier's pounding him, 20 times.
Ali absorbed an enormous amount of punishment, gave out an enormous amount of punishment.
Yeah, and when the 15th came and they said he'd been knocked down, it was like, this can't be.
Ali gets quickly to his feet, but the damage is done. Ali suffers his first loss. It's Frazier by unanimous decision.
This can't have happened. This is impossible. It was impossible not because we didn't believe Joe Frazier could beat Muhammad Ali. It was impossible because his beating him meant they were right. And they couldn't be right. And the right-wing idiots and the hard hat guys and the ugly Americans, they were standing in the way of history. They were standing in the way of change. They were on the side of wrong. And so they couldn't be right. They just couldn't.
In the first blush of defeat, Ali was gracious and elegant. He was perfect in giving Frazier credit.
I've been always handing out the defeat, so now I'm defeated, and now I can see how other people felt. And when I do come back, if I ever do, I'll have more of a hunger, determination, which is something you lose in the intoxication of so-called greatness.
By the next morning, he'd been robbed.
He went on every late-night talk show. He convinced half of America or more that he had won a fight, and it killed Frazier.
He was the only one who believed, coming out of that fight, that he would be champion again.
4 months after his unanimous loss to Frazier, Ali wins a stunning unanimous decision in the Supreme Court, which overturns his conviction for draft evasion.
I mean, nobody would have believed that that could have happened when Ali refused to step forward.
With prison no longer looming, Ali is free to renew his quest to reclaim the title that had been taken from him, a title now held by George Foreman. Ali's momentous match against Foreman is an event unlike anything boxing has ever seen. In 1974, promoter Don King and a consortium of backers make a deal with Zaire's strongman, President Mobutu Sese Seko, to host a worldwide live satellite broadcast of the Rumble in the Jungle.
Ali basically showed that he could transcend the sport. He brought half of the media of the world to Kinshasa, Zaire.
10 long years after he first shook up the world, 32-year-old Ali is once again challenging a heavily favored champion.
Foreman was the second coming of Sonny Liston.
Remember, this wasn't an ordinary heavyweight. This was a guy who could knock down walls.
Everybody felt that Ali was going to get hurt. This was a monster.
I was so afraid that George Foreman was going to kill Ali.
Both fighters train in Zaire for the bout on October 30th, but it's Ali who is embraced by throngs of African fans.
It's unreal the amount of people, 10 to 15,000 people in the crowd following him, just shouting his name.
Ali Boumaier. Ali Boumaier. He'd say, stop the car, and he'd get out, and he'd, Boumaier, Boumaier. He just wanted to create a crowd. Pretty soon you couldn't even walk across the street.
All of that worked in Ali's favor. I mean, he was playing psychological games. He's punching voodoo dolls. He's got people beating on drugs. The champ is here. The champ is here.
Me and maybe one other person thought he could beat George Foreman. He believed it. He believed it.
Ali's confidence isn't shared by many boxing experts. But during the fight, Ali would add rope-a-dope to the lexicon and a great new chapter to his legend.
Ali stands back, ties his man up, leans on the rope.
Ali goes back on the ropes, and the ropes go back more. And Foreman misses by that much.
Wild left hand is not scoring.
Angelo sends his corner guys around to the corners. He says, tighten the ropes. And Ali's saying, oh, leave him. Ali formed, in his mind, he formed the rope-a-dope right there and then.
To take that kind of punishment from a guy like George, who knocked most guys out like they were rag dolls. I can't fathom taking those kind of blows from a guy who punches that hard. Those punches could crack ribs.
How could you take this in your body? And Ali was taking it.
And Foreman was punching himself out.
I had predicted that Foreman was going to annihilate him. And in between rounds, when he started to wear George down, he said, hey, big fella, what do you think now?
Knock George out.
When Muhammad Ali put George down, he had proven that he is indeed the greatest.
Ali beats Foreman. Humiliates. He stops and he says, fellas, you'll never know what this means to me. That should have been his retirement. How can you top that?
You've went through the trials, your ups and your downs, your glory times. This is the time to retire.
He had proven the point. You can't go any further once you prove the point. And there's something about the romance of athletics that it's hard for people to give up.
For him, every fight was another drama, another circus, and he loved every minute of it.
All those available ladies, all this love and admiration. It's very hard to walk away from that.
When Elijah Muhammad dies in February of '75, his son Wallace leads the majority of the Nation of Islam toward traditional Sunni Islam. Ali, who has always had white men in his corner, embraces the change.
Prejudice is a two-way street, you know? He was driving down one side of it at one point in his life. Not unlike Malcolm X, who had a similar journey, and he evolved.
He said, whites can become Muslims. Now he says, so you can become a Muslim. And he hugged me. There wasn't any racism in Ali.
Later that year, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos plays host to the third Ali Frazier fight, the Thrilla in Manila, on October 1st, 1975.
They'd been the two most dominant fighters of their time. Towards the end of their career, oh, here they are again in this big fight, and this is going to be the culmination of it all.
For both fighters, it would also mark the beginning of the end.
The fight took place at about 11 a.m. Manila time. Outside, the hot Philippine sun was beating down, and inside, this fight between these two great athletes was going on.
These two guys was going at each other like they was going to just kill each other.
They both took an enormous beating. They were both heroic, Pittman.
After 14 rounds of battle in the sweltering heat, Frazier and Ali, both mentally and physically spent, go to their corners to await the final round.
That moment that you're sitting on your stool, your eyes swollen shut, or your legs are gone, you're totally exhausted. You look across and see your opponent, and he is just as in bad shape as you are. All of a sudden, your mind and your heart says, "That's ready to go?" And either you answer yes or no. Most guys say no. The special ones say yes. Ali was the one who said yes.
Joe couldn't answer the bell. And Ali just passed out in the ring.
It's all over.
He said it was the nearest thing to dying.
In the year after his punishing victory over Frazier, Ali defends his title 4 times, including a brutal 15-round win over Ken Norton. His longtime ring doctor, Ferdy Pacheco, sees the writing on the wall.
Pacheco went to Norton's locker room and told him, "Congratulations, you just ended Ali's career." Norton had lost, but Ali was physically beat up.
The following year, his speed and skills diminished. Ali survives a 15-round slugfest with Ernie Shavers,
Muhammad Ali, not down but hurt.
the hardest-hitting heavyweight in boxing.
Said that Ernie Shavers hit me so hard that my ancestors in Africa turned over in their graves. Which was a fabulous line, except the way that he said it was just the beginning of a slur in his speech.
In February of '78, Ali loses his title to Leon Spinks, a novice with just 7 fights under his belt. But he's not done yet.
Fights Spinks again, beats him, regains the title, and then Don King gets Ali to fight Larry Holmes, and I was absolutely horrified.
The Holmes bout is set for October 1980, a year after Ali's last fight against Spinks. His deterioration is evident.
Even to those of us who never looked at Ali with clear eyes, it was clear that he was done.
Holmes wins by TKO in the 11th round, the first time Ali has ever failed to go the distance.
Whatever damage had been done to Ali in all of these 12, 15-round fights, all of that had come together to leave him a shell of what he once was.
A year later, Ali steps into the ring one last time to fight Trevor Berbick on December 11, 1981.
The whole family went, and up until the fight, we were begging him in his hotel room, "Don't fight, you don't need to do this anymore."
After the loss to Berbick, Ali finally calls it a career.
It's hard to tell a champ that it's time, it's over, because we always believe we can always win that fight.
Ali fought. That's what he did. And we who loved him really had no say in it and no right to say, "No, we don't want you to fight anymore because it ruins our memory." Well, he had a right to say, "I will choose when I'm going to leave it." And he did.
The first few years of retirement were hard for Ali. He was no longer in the spotlight as heavyweight champion of the world. But the worst thing was that the Parkinson's syndrome was becoming clearer and clearer.
When you stay in the ring too long, it's going to really start wearing down on you, and that's exactly what happened to my father.
Ali's Parkinson's syndrome is made public in 1984.
It's really hard for me and everyone else to see a man who used to be so great with words. Now that's one of the things that he can't do.
It's a sad thing because you wonder what he would be saying now.
We need that Louisville lip because there's nobody speaking for African Americans or Americans like Ali spoke. That voice just isn't there.
When Ali stopped really talking in public and really doing his whole Ali thing, he has said so much that it still echoes.
I have enough inside here and inside here to replay it for life.
We're in a hotel room in Las Vegas at an event. And this is like 90s, so the Parkinson's he can still walk, but he's talking very soft. And he goes, I want to make it to heaven, and I wasn't a perfect person, and this Parkinson's shut me down. I can't do nothing wrong now, But he said, I'd rather suffer now than in the hereafter.
By 1986, Ali is 5 years into retirement and on his third marriage. He and his second wife, Khalila, were divorced in 1975.
He was doing a lot of cheating. He's weak for women. I just didn't know how weak he was.
Ali's next marriage to Veronica Porsche would last 10 years.
My father would say he was the best Muslim he could be, given that he was this gorgeous Adonis boxer that all the women loved.
In the summer of '86, Ali and Veronica are divorced. Later that year, he marries his fourth wife, Lonnie Williams, who he first met in Louisville back in 1963. In 1996, Ali would make a memorable return to the global spotlight.
We were thinking who would be an American Olympian who could light the cauldron that would mean the most to people watching around the globe. Ali was the guy who made the most sense. And it was not met with wide open endorsement. There were some people who said, well, he was a draft dodger, wasn't he?
Misher and Ali's longtime friend Howard Bingham work out a deal in which they agree to keep Ali's torch-lighting role a secret.
Howard Bingham calls me. Your dad's lighting the torch. Don't tell anyone. Just call your sisters and brothers.
And I'm in a control room at the bottom of the stadium with 26 cameras and, directing the world feed. But even down there, in the bowels of the stadium, I could hear what was going on up there. And I never dreamed that it would be that strong and that powerful.
When my father gets nervous, he shakes more. So he's shaking the torch, and I'm like, oh, Lord, Dad gonna burn down the stadium.
There was a part of me saying, oh my God, look at Muhammad, feeling sorry. But then there was the other part of me said, for God's sake, that's Muhammad Ali.
To have predicted in 1967 how much Ali and his personality would resonate around the world 20 or 30 years later, there were a lot of people that would have said that will never happen.
The transformation of Ali from the most hated man in America to this beatified Ali of today
was complete reversal. But those of us who believed we were in the right back in the 60s, this simply validates it. That, hey, you finally came around. You couldn't stop the march of history. He saw where it was going. He pointed the way. You hated him for it, but you couldn't stop it.
Ali is awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in January 2005. Later that year, the nonprofit Muhammad Ali Center opens in downtown Louisville, not far from where his bike had been stolen over 50 years before.
His legacy is that when you believe in yourself, no matter what the odds are, if you're on the right side of history, and if you perfect your craft, you can accomplish anything.
He stood up on a level that nobody else stood up, and he had a platform that no one else had, risking his personal success and his personal wealth to basically tell the truth.
People today are fond of saying, yes, Muhammad Ali stood up for his principles, but there's been a determined effort to wipe away cognizance of what those principles once were. Don't wipe out the memories of what Muhammad stood for in the 1960s. Take it, build on it, and show how Muhammad Ali and America both changed and came together in the end.
He was no saint. He was no devil. He was Muhammad Ali. And nobody else ever was or ever could be.